I recently attended Permissionless in Austin, Texas, and on this QuickPod, I just want to talk about the 3 things I'm taking away from the event. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. The 3 things I'm taking away from Permissionless are the following. Number 1, and I tweeted about this, and I'll leave the tweet in the show notes, is that content creators are rare. At the event, I was there as a content creator or someone in media or someone basically there to engage with people, see what's going on, create content, and be kind of like a digital storyteller. And I can tell you that at the event, being a content creator was rare. I've known this, right? I sit around and I look at Spotify and I look at YouTube and I try to get a grasp of what's going on for content creators in the space, whether it's podcasters or people that run YouTube channels, or people that are just blowing up Instagram accounts with reels or short form content. I know that there's a certain amount of people out there, and there's people that I look up to, and there's people that I find every single day that I'm like, whoa, I didn't know you were doing that. That's really cool. But the one takeaway I guess I have from the event is that content creators are rare, and especially the content creators that are going to make it through this current bear market and into the bull market. If you're creating content, or even if you have a brand, a product, or a service, you need to really think about how you're messaging that idea to the rest of the world. Because the way we're doing that now is we're using social media, and a lot of it is short form video to basically share in 1 minute a fairly complex idea with your audience. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that Bitcoin is inevitable. Much like what Thanos says in the movie Avengers, when he says, I am inevitable, it seems that Bitcoin is now inevitable. Now, for the Bitcoin communities or people that would identify themselves as Bitcoin maxis, it's probably no surprise to them that at Permissionless, which is more of a crypto or Web3 conference, that there wasn't a lot of Bitcoin content. There wasn't a lot of Bitcoin brands there. But this doesn't really surprise me. And I think that's because Bitcoin is slowly becoming boring. It's something that's not exciting anymore. It's going to be around. Shortly, probably in the next 6 months, we're going to have a Bitcoin ETF, which is going to allow so many more people to basically gain exposure to this new asset. And this idea that Bitcoin is kind of inevitable and it's kind of boring and therefore we don't need to talk about it anymore, let's talk about all these other exciting things that are being built, was really driven home at a conversation that I was able to see with the Blockworks and the Bankless founders. Now, Blockworks is a media company and Bankless is also a media company, and they were the 2 sponsors for the event. And it was in their talk, and I can't remember who said it, but one of them basically said, yeah, Bitcoin's here. It's not going anywhere, so we don't really need to dive into it as much anymore. And that kind of hit home. And that makes sense. That even though this wasn't a Bitcoin-only event, it was more of a crypto or Web3 event, and I know that that can be super nuanced. It's almost like we don't need to talk about Bitcoin anymore because it's here, it's not going anywhere, and it really is starting to serve the role of being the new money on the internet that people can use around the world. Bitcoin is almost boring. And I guess the last thing I'll say is Anthony Pompliano talked about Bitcoin, and he said the following. He said, Bitcoin is something that traditional finance people or people that aren't in crypto or digital assets, they look at it and they think, oh my God, it's so risky. And yet within crypto, within NFTs, within Web3, within the economies of digital assets, most people think Bitcoin's boring. So he's always talked about how Bitcoin is a fascinating thing in that it's too risky for the TradFi people that are just buying stocks and real estate and commodities, but it's way too boring for the people that are flipping NFTs and buying other cryptocurrencies. So in some sense, that's probably a really good way to kind of position Bitcoin in the conversation today around cryptocurrencies and digital assets. So that's number 2. And then number 3, this is more of a critique of the event. There were a lot of talks where the people who were talking were not on stage. And we already live in a virtual world where if I want to hear someone talk, I can just search their name on YouTube and I can hear them talk. And I think if you go to one of these events, if you go to an IRL event, the importance of being IRL is super important. And if you listen to the previous episode, episode 92, where I talk about the parallels between the movie Oppenheimer and crypto events, one of the things I really touch upon is how important it is to be able to be IRL with the people that you're building, even if it's every 6 months or every year or whatever it is important when you have an event and people come together that people are there IRL, in person, especially when it comes to speakers. And the one I really want to call out is Vitalik Buterin, who is the Ethereum founder and creator. He wasn't there. And when I went to go see him talk, we were like, oh, he's going to be there. And then he wasn't. He was just on a screen. And if I want to hear Vitalik talk, I can just listen to a podcast. I can watch him on YouTube. And the way that I try to describe this to myself is like, if I paid $1,000 to go see Hamilton on Broadway, and then they drop down a screen and then they just put on Disney Plus, I would be super like, what the hell? I would be like, where's my money? And so that's the only thing that I will say as far as a critique. And so that's number 3. I think in the IRL world, or when we're in IRL at an event, it is super important that the people who are putting it on do their best to get as many of the speakers there on stage. So there you have it in review. Creators, content creators, basically digital storytellers are super, super important to move the space forward, to move products, to move services forward. Number 2, Bitcoin is now just so inevitable and will soon be such a big part of the traditional finance or TradFi system that it's almost like not sexy or exciting to talk about anymore, at least at crypto and Web3 events. And then number 3, I just think if you're going to put on an event and you're going to have a speaker and they're a big speaker like Vitalik, they need to be there in person. Obviously, I know life happens and I can be empathetic towards different situations popping up, but people want to see Vitalik in person. I know I did, and I'm not the only one. So there you go. Those are my big 3 takeaways from this year's Permissionless in Austin, Texas. Thanks for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain, and go ahead and follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain. And if you don't do so already, be sure to follow us on YouTube. I say it all the time, but I am starting to put up more unique content that will only exist on YouTube. A lot of it is short form video. So go ahead and follow us on YouTube at More Than Blockchain. No matter where you're listening to the pod, please go ahead and subscribe. And if you enjoyed this episode, or you attended Permissionless, or you've attended a crypto event, and you found this to be relevant, please go ahead, share it with a friend, family member, colleague, DM it, email it, text it, however. Thanks again for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain, and I'll see you next time.